Shadow IT exists in places you may not have even imagined. Keep watching to find out where you might have a shadow IT issue and how you can take advantage of it. I'm delighted to be joined by Michał Mołdrzyk. It's the second of a series of videos we're doing on, I think, some really important issues. And Michał, prior to this particular video, you shared something, and I think it's really cool, shadow IT. I've never seen that phrase before. Tell us a bit, what is shadow IT?
What is the shadow IT? To explain it in simple words, it's the second IT that is created by the users in the organization that the IT department is not aware of.
So let's go a bit deeper. So guys, in case you haven't worked out what the sort of situation is, Michał actually shared a really good example where, for example, couriers might use something like WhatsApp to communicate instead of the traditional app-based solutions. Sometimes, Michał, I guess it's also you might just use your mobile phone, avoiding processes and procedures that are normally there. And then one example that I've got, which is perennial, I think, is where you have really great route optimization that someone has spent a lot of time and effort to optimize, but then some of the drivers decide they know better and they do their own thing. Michał, I'm not saying that there is never a case that a human can be better, but in reality, when you look at it over a longer period of time, the systems generally are good. And generally, if they're introduced well, they are going to give a better result. So what do you think is the cause? Is it that the tech team are not able to communicate enough with the operators, or is it something else?
The most important question, Marek, is it people or is a system you provide to people to operate? Yeah, and there is no clear answer. It depends on the case. But I have seen many situations when the tools provided to the organization are not just good enough to operate. You have to remember that last mile is a real-time operation, and many of the tools that are provided to couriers are not acting as a real-time systems. And that's why the couriers are looking for the solution that helps to survive the delivery day, the delivery operation.
Maybe because I know you've done a lot of work on this, and I think it's actually a really good point that you make. So I know that when you've been doing software like this, you've spent a lot of time looking at, how can you make life easier? How do you avoid silly mistakes? I know when I was doing something at Amazon, we actually spent, I think, 60% of non-IT time preparing for the IT guys to have a really good process so that there could be something really good. So tell us a little bit about some of your experiences. What can be done to make sure that, you have as few clicks as possible, that the communication does not take needlessly long, which is frustrating. What's your experience in that space?
So the most important factor, I think, is to deeply understand how the people operate. So you shouldn't design the solution from the office thinking that you know how the operations looks like, what are the challenges, what are the issues the courier deal with every day. So the first thing is to understand how they operate and how would they like to operate. And I think the shadow IT, we discussed the shadow IT, is the very good source of that information. So it's when you find out that you have a shadow IT, it's not the case to be worried about, but to get the best of that and treat it as the best requirements for the changes you have to implement in the solution you already have to make the couriers work easier, better, and faster.
That's actually quite a good way of looking at it. So if you're able to do that, and I know that when we've been doing things together, I actually took this from you. You call it discovery. The first thing before you implement any project was actually to do that. And I would imagine things like the shadow IT elements would come up during discovery phase.
Yes, that's how we operate. Every project, we start with the discovery phase and find out all the restrictions, all the tribal knowledge below the, IT department radar, sometimes operational guys radar, to see the real operations, the real challenges, and then start designing the solution. And the shadow IT is very good source of information to make a very good discovery phase. Of course, if you have the shadow IT, you need to react because it brings a lot of dangers and cost to your organization, but you can treat it as a positive factor to the changes you need to introduce.
So I think this moves us on really well to the next topic I wanted to discuss. So on one hand, it's good to understand that there is shadow IT and to learn from it. But what sort of things can you do to eliminate it? Because in the long run, it's much better. I think we all agree that the core system is able to give the efficiency and user experience that's needed. So from your experience, what sort of things can be done to minimize the need for and the risk of shadow IT?
I think you need to be very close to the operational people on the field. That's the main reason. And then you can listen to their opinion, see their behavior, and address it in the IT. That's simple, but very hard to do. And I haven't seen a lot of organizations that are performing it well.
And I think, Michał, this is a thing because I think you have to almost be fanatically interested. When I remember when we were doing things like this together, we really did such a deep dive to understand every element of it. And I think sometimes people, maybe, I don't know, Michał, you'll know more because you're on the tech side, but because of budget constraints or others, tend to jump 2 steps too far without doing all of that due diligence.
Yes, that's a common case. So decision makers are thinking that they exactly know what to do, how to solve the problems, how to design the process, but the reality is different. And the couriers are dealing in the real world, not the designed and process world. They deal with the people, deal with the weather, deal with any situations on the field they have.
And again, we discussed, and these are actually your points, not mine, but you mentioned pretty sort of, I think, some important points that on top of the other issues, you don't get the best of your system. Sometimes you lose operational data and an opportunity to optimize because if people are using shadow IT, it's not visible in the system. And, if I somehow manage to get a customer's phone and call them, I guess there could be GDPR risks and compliance risks. So it seems that it's all great. And from a driver perspective, it might seem a lot easier. But holistically, shadow IT, I think you said it nicely when we talked earlier, it looks free and efficient, but actually this is quite good, silently undermines control. But let's think, what should operators then do instead? So I think, we've agreed it happens. We've agreed you can learn from it. We've agreed you generally don't want it. So what can we do then in a scenario where we see significant use of shadow IT?
I think the first step to the operator is to get the knowledge if the shadow IT exists in the organization or not, because I think a lot of decision makers are not aware about the shadow IT existence in the organization. That's the first most important step. Then try not to ban it, but try to look as opportunity to implement changes in the proper IT, the main IT you provide to the operators. And then convince the people, the couriers mostly, to use the tools you provide, but not by banning the shadow IT, but by providing the solution functionalities that are similar to the tools they want to use. Because courier use some open communicator to deal with the dispatchers and other couriers. That means they need real-time multi-to-multi communication, not the request-response communication. If they want send a picture, because it's much easier to communicate with the photo, not just the text. It could be good to implement that functionality in your system. And you need to think about the all profits you also get with these changes, because on one hand, all the organization is using your tools. On the other hand, you have control on that tools. So you're mitigating the risk with the GDPR, loss of the functionality, some tribal knowledge that is outside of the organization. And on the other hand, you are preparing your organization to gather the data, to analyze the data, and maybe in the future, use the data in the different ways. For example, the AI agents. So only benefits.
So if we were to really summarize the discussion, I think what we're saying is the following. Probably, and correct me if you have a different view, Michał, shadow IT exists in more places than we might imagine. We can either fight it or use it. And if we use it well, it can actually be a pretty good way for us to do our discovery and to look at where we can improve things. And I think maybe it also tells us that sometimes, are we designing enough for what people really need? Or are we designing things that look good with our overall policy and structures?
Yes, it's exactly the case I have seen in many organizations. So when you design the process, you think how it should look like and how is the best way to operate. But you're missing a lot of data, information that need to be considered during that designing process. And the knowledge is in the mind of people that are working every day in that environment. And you need to gain that knowledge. That's the reason why we put so much attention on the discovery phase on every project, because that's the key to success. If you have wrong assumptions on the beginning of the project, you will never succeed with the solution you deliver.
So here you have it. If you want to make sure that you benefit from any shadow IT, you know who to call. We'd love to hear your comments and opinions, but Michał's also available if you want to discuss with him, because I've been there myself, and the learnings that are possible through great discovery are incredible. Of course, you can also call me and LME, but I think this was really fascinating, Michał. Thank you. It was your topic. It was a really good one. And maybe all of you out there can think and maybe share with us examples of where shadow IT has either given you benefits or actually been a bit of a dangerous tool that hasn't been used. Michał, as usual, great talking. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Marek. As usual, it was a pleasure to discuss it with you. Thank you.